That's from last week. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another community conversation. I would like to start off tonight with a question in response to Frederick Douglass's speech to what the slave, the 4th of July. I wrote a poem entitled, To What America, the 19th of June. Today, I've arrived here to this moment torn at the soul, just as Professor Du Bois spoke of the souls of Black folk. I've questioned constantly the integrity of a nation, and I've searched for it thoroughly, and I've only found enough to barely cover the surface. And as I dig deeper, I find less and practically no integrity at the core. Only fire among the elements and nothing more than sprinkled seeds of hatred now deeply rooted. I see them everywhere. Wickedness, weeds of wickedness from policies, education, housing, hiring, imprisonment, the clothes you wear. I stare deeply into the fabric of the construction of race and listen deeply to the words written of freedom, but pay more attention to the actions that take place as I count the wads of spit rolling down my face. And so, yes, we have arrived to the eve of the 19th. We have arrived to the 19th of June under this Mercury retrograde and clear skies of sunlight. The consciousness of humans have shifted, alone to avoid disease and death, to remain alert on right and left, to gaze deeply into a deeper admiration of breath. The truth is that it attacked the freedom to live, and it's a common enemy, therefore a common cause. And brewing inside this nation's walls is the wrath of hatred continuing to sharpen its claws and laying knees to back and shooting you as you sleep and hanging you from these trees and overkill your lack of resistance, run over your protests with cars driven by fragile egos. Seems like it remains persistent even in the face of a common foe. I don't know. Fool me once, twice, again, and overflow. Seems it goes to show that I'm tired of the shame being on me. When nothing but misery remains as residue. The right has always been on the walls, but just didn't seem legible. To what then, America, the 19th of June? Seems like when you reach for a light called freedom, and upon fighting and dying for it, swore to God to uphold the dignity and integrity of liberty and justice. But even if you did or did not, how have you likened yourself to God so much that you feel you are the creator of freedom itself? When did you declare the power of heaven or hell with no proof? It's like you reached for the light of freedom, but took disregard for who you stood on to grab it and left there in the shadow and played with freedom like Play-Doh, shaping it to your liking with the wit of a 4-year-old child in a tantrum. June 19th is like America too, be it a day of your own creation, because a nation still was built in the shadows to fight for your freedom since 1776. Now, ain't that the American way, to fight for your freedom, to fight for your freedom? Ain't that the American way? Ain't that the human instinct? When it's pushed and pushed and pushed into problems it can no longer solve, into a pressure that kidnaps its resolve until it's pushed into the darkest of fogs? Has it not been evident by these words alone that I speak, that I learn how to read, that we must evolve, survive? Is that not how America is still alive? To provide this sense of freedom. Imagine the beauty in this. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with justice and liberty for all? Is this for glamour? To mock my existence under this dark and melanated skin? Is my role here to watch, observe, pretend to not see how hatred is permitted to defile these amendments? Does my heartbeat alone not prove to you that I am alive and hindered by your hatred stored into me like data, like DNA, like you rather operate off my heartbreak, brainwash my electrical units for self-destruction, no proper function, so when I resist properly, oh, he has a gun, pow, 10 times, generations, times ain't an amazing, we still learn the ability to love. In the midst of, I can't take no more, to persevere, to endure, to love through it all, the hell, the trauma, be it blatant or hidden, to love. What do you know about love, America? Love how we just shut up and play basketball and football and say nothing about no offense to humanity. Love how we just shut up and don't say nothing that makes you uncomfortable, considering the aches in the space where your heart once laid grimaces with the silence to all this violence. Love how we just love that drug. Love how we just fight wars and die on front lines, fight wars across the world and come back and be hung in our uniforms. Love how we just forget the sounds of chains connected to others and chains and screams and cold. Love how you just won't let us forget how to see all this hate and like it and fear it. Love how you postcard our lynchings and alligator our babies and sterilize our women and institutionalize our children. Love how we just supposed to ignore your wrecking ball to the nation we build, and yet we pledge with no fingers crossed behind our backs. Love how we ignore the voices in the torment of our skin when that parallels to the torment of yesterday. Love how we supposed to believe that we are free and ignore your continuous egotistical declarations of liberty. With your hand to God, I can hear all those hammers to the tracks from chain gangs, man. Those death row cups to bars, your spirited disregard when all life matters until they don't. Can't even love who you want. Can't even be who you want. Now, how is that free to be when hatred has held this liberty hostage? We are supposed to be building near other stars and orbits, but our fairy tales are constantly trolled and goblin, try to black against black crime, the narrative, try to reverse racism, propaganda, the media. What heaven waits for you when you lie with your hand on Bibles and or watch others do it as if it never happened? Yeah, I'm still laughing, proacting my reactions. Let this occasion be of your own doing, so it let it be decreed. I'm tired of being deceived. We tired of being deceived, tired with not being fully detached to discover my freedom. It's like we pardon my post-trauma, but it seems like we are hypnotized by hurt, mesmerized by pain. Ignorant people remain watching us doing the game, puppet pulling the strings, fooled into disdain, settling for a raise when the whole system needs to change. Like hatred sits well on this nation's sleeve, like hatred sits well and uses our backs to take knees. I can still hear the shots for Mr. Reed. I can still feel his mother's tears of misery. Hatred took the big homie and he was supposed to be making moves, like, right? He was supposed to leave, but life, right? He wasn't supposed to leave, so we supposed to grow, supposed to love, supposed to breathe. My soul shine full power supreme like Jupiter beams, choosing God over Lucifer seems, marching towards my crown like a king on mountaintops. I'm supposed to dream by any means. Stand, God. We are the vanguard. Been broken, beat down with no mediocre strokes, hurt to hatred, hopes to let me go by way of dope to doubt to ropes to bullets, strays or execution. It be so lucid. Every day is a funeral. Everyone is assumed to know how to heal on. Land my ancestors used tears of blood to build on. So I drag my face through history and misery. It's the same. Being dragged through fire and fields of barbed wire fields. I hope they remember our aims. Too many applaud the fame before they can recognize the pain. Constantly numb for layers of death all over this nation. We singing the same thing. No struggle without progress. No progress without struggle. No justice. No peace. Freedom now. Say they name. That's that piece. I think we're ready to begin.
Wow. I don't even know if we can begin after that. Wow. I mean, you wrote that yesterday?
It's been been brewing pieces here and there. And then, but sometimes, like, I think, have you seen the freestyle, Brandon? I know you've seen the freestyle. You just got to dedicate yourself to a space to really kind of vacuum in your feelings, your words, how to really convict, but I'm just blessed. I'm blessed to be here. I'm blessed to have crossed people in my past to just kind of help me understand the meaning of that. So
we are glad to have you here as well. And I don't even know where to start, Eric. So I mean, you're just gonna have to take over. Like, this is your show.
Look, I'm all
about education. All about education, and we have been educating people at First Friday for a long time.
Indeed. And so here we are tonight, and we have our guests, and you have to, like I said, I'm trying to pull up my agenda now. I think I look all these 2 phones and everything, and I can't find what I need.
So how about we do this? Yeah. We have some amazing, we have some amazing people with us. So I'm gonna ask you guys to do a quick intro so that we can get into the show, but definitely want people, we could do it, but I think it just sounds better when it comes from you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
We want to hear your voices.
So we'll go ladies first. Okay. Oh, yeah, voices down there, Brandon. Thank you. We'll start with Shayla, and then we'll just go around.
Hello, I'm Shayla Webb. I am an attorney by trade, but I head up D&I for the state of Indiana. I love it, but it's intense. It's a passion. And one thing I'm going to change what I was going to say in my intro, but when you said overkill, if you think about what's happening right now, when we think about, so the law, sorry, this is the introduction. You think about the law, and when you see somebody killed with overkill, there's passion attached. So there's passion attached to what they're doing in such a negative way, but then we're saying that they can change. You can't change your passions like that. So sorry, that wasn't my intro. You know my name, you know what I do, and now you
that
know
was your intro.
Where I'm at. So thank you.
I know where you stand, because we're good.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right, who wants to go next? Jack, we'll go. I'm just gonna go like around what I see. We'll go Jack, and then we'll go down to Brandon, and we'll come up to Rodney, and then hit Fitz last while he's drawing.
We think about go next.
Hello there, everyone. My name is Jack Hesser. I teach 7th grade science at Harshman Middle School. Recently was recognized as Indianapolis Public School Teacher of the Year. Really excited to be here. I just want to take a moment, Eric. That was so good.
Thank you, sir.
I'm a science teacher, so this doesn't like really surprise me, but the line that really hit me so hard was the "Does my heart beat alone not prove I'm alive?" And I was just like, I teach characteristic of life in 7th grade, and I was just like, it just hit me hard. That was really incredible, Eric.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Pat. Brandon, on you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brandon Randall. I'm the Day Reporting Program Director for Voices. I'm excited to be here. I just hopped off of Project King with Bloom Project. We were talking about how to use your passion in a positive way to mobilize young people to commit to demonstration or just organizing around change. So I feel like that's a great segue for the conversation tonight. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Brandon.
I wanted to be on that call, but had another call. Let's see who we got up next.
Rodney.
Rodney, what's happening, brother?
What's going on? I'm Rodney Smith. I'm from Indianapolis, graduated from Pike High School, went to Purdue University. Now I teach at Pike High School. I love teaching. I'm also a father, an author, and an artist, a musical artist.
And most importantly,
oh, your brother.
My brother-in-law.
I was like,
and we should have saved that for the end. That's all good.
And then we have Fitz. What's happening, brother? You muted. Yeah, you're muted.
Here we go. All right, here we go. Yeah, my name is Fitz. Shane Young is my government name, the one Uncle Sam gave me. I'm an artist. I'm from Indianapolis, born and raised. Graduated from in Florida, unfortunately, and yeah, I've been doing art all my life.
Welcome. We're excited to see what you come up with.
What'd you say, Tamika?
I said, welcome. We're excited to see what he comes up with.
What's your vision for the night? What you got for us?
I really didn't know. She hit me with I think this was Monday and said, "Hey, do you want to do something cool?" I was like, "Sure, why not?" And pretty much just about education and about racism, so I can completely understand that. So I just basically drew my homie in the classroom, basically thinking about everything that we don't learn in school. So wow. Yeah.
That's what's up. Thank you for being here tonight. And I think, Tamika, you would probably say that I don't care what nobody says about Indianapolis. I know everything that's going on and what you hear and what you see. But in the time that Tamika and I have been able to work together, we have come across maybe just between us about 25, 29, about 30 different visual artists.
Yeah.
And that's just who came through Tease Me in the last 2.5 years. So I know for a fact that there's something very vibrational going on in this city, to where there are a lot of artists, there's a lot of people that's, you know, describing what they feel. Because again, the interesting thing about it, and I think this is kind of going to kick us into our conversation, is that, and Fitz would probably agree, as he said, you have folks who have love in their heart, and they're starting to project it more through art. So what you're starting to hear more, and just me being around from this function to this function, is I'm seeing and I'm feeling real pain, real trauma. Jack, what do you say? You teach science or mathematics? Either way, we got to calculate and analyze. If the violence is spreading, therefore those who are perceiving it is spreading. And so the artists and the poets, our declarations are pretty much, if you see a lot, that's a straight line to the fact that there's a lot going on. So again, they are communicating. We are communicating, even the way of that poem.
Yeah.
Precisely, and that's how it's always been. So I just wanted to, say that I'm glad you guys are all here to join us tonight, man. We about to get into it, man. I know this is about to get real interesting, because the first week we started, it was more
just talking about racism in general, where we were, where everybody's headspace was, just mindset, thoughts. I mean, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, like just drilling down on that. I mean, it was, and we have the spoken word artist. So it's really just about the word, right? The spoken word, and just being able to use poetry, like you just said, beautiful. And then, last week coming into it, really just looking at, I think the most important part of all of this is really just being able to have such a diverse group and focus on young and old, and, young and older, I shouldn't say old, young and older, really being able to kind of go through the past. So last week, coming off of doing the sit-in with Black women in charge, and coming out, just being able to speak truth. And then of course, education, and then next week will be faith. And in my mind, I kind of started looking at when I started putting together, and then I brought Eric in the fold and was just like, hey, this is what I want to do. What do you think about this idea? But racism is something that we have all been touched by, some to different levels, to some different capacity. And now we're all affected once again differently. And to what you just said, as you start looking at artists, as you start looking at spoken word artists, as you start looking at musicians and all the different teachers and all the different phases, we all go to the corners that we're most comfortable with. And when you think about racism, it's uncomfortable to talk about. It's a hard topic to talk about. It's a hard thing to really dwell on. And so really being able to have these conversations has been important. And I've learned a lot the last 2 weeks. So I'm really excited about tonight. And I know I can't wait to hear from the 5, 6 of you guys, and really just being able to talk about education.
Okay. And so just so you guys give you a warning tonight, I have been I've been Teddy Riley'd a couple of times. And so if, like I said, my dear brother on another call, Sabeko Jawanza, said, if I just go like that, then just know that, that I've paused or something like that. I have children, so they might run across the back. But again, I just want to give that the COVID Zoom disclaimers. So let's go ahead and hop into it, man. I'm glad to see everybody laughing, especially today, man. Just today was different. But going forward, let's just go ahead and crack it off, man. We want to, considering the layer that of everything that we're dealing with, COVID, social injustice, so on and so forth. And we've just kind of layered this from week to week, and here we are in week 3 with you guys. With everything going on, the topic of the night is education. When you hear that, what do you think about it? Take it away, anybody. I'll pick you.
I think of it like, when I heard the topic, I was really excited for it, because I think there's like two, we could narrow it down further, but I think there's like 2 large buckets here, right? There's education in the way that our education system has like not met its promise for our Black and brown students. And then there's education is in all of the things that we didn't learn, right? So like, to me, that like that's immediately where mine went, is like these two, both important, but these two like buckets of like that topic of how we're serving our students, and then like what we all experienced growing up, and like maybe the gaps that we had and what we didn't learn.
I'll speak on that too. I think about the gaps. When I knew that this topic was going to be education, my mind went to our future generation, right? Are they going to care about education to change what they don't like? Or are they going to write it off because there's so many gaps in what we don't learn? And typically what they don't learn is about them. So are they going to completely write off education because they don't see themselves, or will they embrace education to bring a face that they didn't see? That's what I started to think about when we chose the topic of education.
Yeah, I agree with her. When I read that question, the first thing I thought of is the fact that we don't even define education. And then we don't take it a step further to say, well, what do we want this system to do for us? Because no matter what system you choose, there's no way to know everything, because nobody knows everything. So why don't we ask the question, what is education and how does it serve us? And I agree with her. If we don't teach the youth to think in that way, then the system will stay the way that it is. And I don't think the system is broken, because it's working for some people.
Yeah, for me, I guess in my mind it's what else besides education. So during this COVID-19 period, my students have been more concerned with keeping their lights on, looking at resources to not get evicted once the moratoriums lift, having food, and choosing between hustling and asking for help. So that has kind of been the education that I've seen in the last 3 months.
I want to touch on what he just said. I think that in my world, I think education is about survival, because everything he just talked about was survival. If we were the first humans on Earth, we need to find food and shelter and know where predators are. If we don't do that, our population will die out. So I look at education as survival, no matter what century we're in.
I mean, it's survival because depending on where you fall academically, that determines where you fall socioeconomically most times. So the higher you up, I don't care if you're white, black, brown, whatever, the higher you can go, the more likely you are to be safe from the things that the people at the bottom have to suffer through. So it's survival even more so. But the problem is with education is it's not set up for some people to survive. So if we even think about people having to stay home during COVID, if people are living with their grandparents, living with parents who got to work at a factory or trying to find supplemental income, who's teaching them? Who's making sure that they stay on top of these assignments? And so even in this, even in what a celebrity called the great equalizer, it's not equal. Because if it hits you in a mansion, or if it hits you in a 2-bedroom apartment and 6 people live in there, it's not going to feel very equal. If it hits you and your parents have a college degree, and it hits you and your parents have a 9th, 8th, 7th grade education, it's going to hit you differently. So it's not equal. And so I think that what you're saying, Rodney, about education is so important, because it is survival, but it's not survival for everyone.
So I have a student the other day who has sent me a text message. And he was trying to find a quick way to make some money. And when I asked him, what do you need specifically so I can be specific in my ask, he had asked for money for groceries, for clothing, his cell phone bill, and then studio time. And I was like, studio time? I said, well, maybe we're not going to prioritize studio time because I need you to eat. He said, bro, studio time is a necessity because it's helping me prevent picking up that gun. And I was like, you know what? I didn't even look at it that way. And so I appreciated the fact that he was able to explain that, but also be vulnerable in that moment, that he knew what his coping skill was, and he knew that he needs that at this moment.
And show that the fact that he's willing to invest in it in midst of everything, that I'm going to do my best to reach to survive. And this is one of your students over at Voices, Brandon? Oh, so yeah, so I know. And so that was definitely a great coming to. So And so what I kind of gather from just everybody is, and I'm taking my notes as well, but we touched upon, so this is work our way back from survival, and just down to the levels of that, because it really kind of goes into our second question. But this, I want to just kind of break down what we just heard is the interesting thing about it, and I think we brought this up a couple of weeks ago, there's no one answer to what's going on. Nobody actually said the same thing. And so you guys know how it goes when we get to conferences and when we get to meetings, and man, it sounds like goes good. And then you go to that meeting and you know that this is some foolishness, but you go ahead and keep your mouth closed because you know you want to get upset, but you got upset the last time. You got upset the last time. And I think we're all at that boiling point where say, I don't have to get upset anymore. This flat out isn't working. When the stuff hit the fan, rewind. The fact that the stuff hit the fan and we were not ready to defend ourselves against whatever. We worried about ISIS, worrying about this, but we're not worried about something that COVID kind of seems like an anti-faith, if you ask me. It's a substance that's unseen, and it's but it's evidence of things that you hope for. And what do you mean by that, Eric? I'm not saying that we hope to get sick, but when you operate in a country that's been sick and operating off layers and layers of hatred, how do you not expect for the stench to come from things that you've not been able to take care of, that you wished underneath the shadows, that you wished in the valleys, and they merge together and create diseases that. It's, so on the flip side, it sounds like right because it's logic, because you produced this and we weren't ready. But what it did do was expose just how much we're not ready. It exposed the that's what I was just trying to get in, capturing that poem. The fact and that it was almost like pull a bear and like, oh, there's absolutely no integrity here. None. There's documentational proof of hatred so deeply that it is rooted into decision making. And we've continued to do decision making to the point where it becomes divided. And we police each other off of how we carry out the culture. Oh, you're not dressed proper, or you don't speak proper, or you're not on time, or you don't look professional. According to what standard? That's the problem with which is caused the believability of anything, because we all, whether what I'm saying, I think it was brought up to where the system is working for some people and not the system is not working for anyone. The concept we cannot be so naive, and that's the concept of what's going on right now, to where why is me as a Black man have to be asked, and this is my house, this is my wife, these are my kids, that's my car, this, that, and the other. I'm fine, but I'm not okay. I'm still eating, but I'm not okay. Because again, we're not talking about the consumerism of everything which you're able to uphold. We're still talking about the fact that this all started with hatred in our system. So whether you got money, this, that, and other, you got millionaires that commit suicide. So we're talking about right down to the very core of hatred, so deeply rooted. Before I got on this call, I was just on another call watching the Lynch Quilt Project by LaShonda Crow. And we're from here literally watching images of people being lynched and people observing, and then people sending postcards out that people still have today in their family photos. But then I'm supposed to trust you with the education department of the nation, of the country. I'm supposed to trust you with the country.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah, sorry, that was my breakdown. So now we're going to go into.
Yeah, so we talk about all this, but I guess the real question is, how do you make change? So, we have teachers, we have educators, we have Shayla from the state side. Like, how do we make change?
Shayla, that, and because I know we're education, but I think one of the views people don't even often see is the law and the politics behind it. Can you tap on that? change from that part?
I can. And I think it goes into education. So I've heard, and follow me here, I've heard people say, why don't we teach different Black history in school? You know, why don't we dig deeper? The problem with that, the problem with teaching more Black history, and the problem with trying to train up more attorneys in civil matters and in criminal matters, and the problem with trying to change the prosecutor's office is twofold. One, systemic racism is so deep that when people tell you they don't see it, they really might not see it because it goes under the radar. And then, like you said, it turns into, oh, you're not professional. Oh, you're not on time. But really, it's me. Because I've had many a meeting with white colleagues where they were not on time, but it was excused. But for us, it's the, oh, they're on Black time joke when you leave. And so when I look at the law, when I look at my time at the prosecutor's office, when I look at even my education, if it's systemic, we're not even practicing the law effectively. We're not regulating the laws effectively. We're not administering justice effectively. And we can't because it's not built on a system to be just. It's built. And the problem is, it's unjust to us, but we don't do anything about it until it's unjust to the person it was supposed to benefit. And so I don't currently practice law because I had a hard time coming to terms with that I'm trying to push for change, but they're pushing for results and wins. Who's winning? So another guilty Black person in jail means that, yep, all Black people are criminal, all Black people are bad. But to free one means that they're going to end up right back here where they started, recidivism. So there was no win to it. You would look for justice, but there was no justice because things are tainted. It's smoke and mirrors. So the law, I believe in it. I believe that there are just people. I believe that there are just prosecutors and just defense attorneys. But I also know for a fact that they will sit a Black person in jail for as long as it takes for them to plead guilty and be as innocent as could be.
So what I'm hearing is this kind of getting towards that solution is again coming back to that concept of integrity and how that actually gets still. So guys, what we was just, I think she framed it and I framed it just on the concept of systemic racism. We know over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of conversations regarding George Floyd, and we know what that has taken off. But again, I just wanted to repeat, what about the systemic racism, how it plays into the world? What are your thoughts? What are your solutions for change? So Rodney, Jack, or Brandon?
All right. Oh, who go? You want them to go? You want me to go ahead?
Yeah, yep, you got it.
All right. Yeah, I want to touch on the systemic racism as far as education and how that spills over to everything else. The reason people don't see it is because institutions standardize and normalize information. And when you look at the school system, no matter what subject or discipline that you start with, the core of it is something European. If you're an artist, you got to study Van Gogh, Georgia O'Keeffe. If it's dance and ballet, ballet is Greek. If we look at Pythagoras and the Pythagorean theorem, he's Greek. So you mean to tell me the Egyptians built the pyramids without knowing the Pythagorean theorem? Yes, they did. But the problem is that the system was created by Europeans for Europeans. If it wasn't working for Europeans, they wouldn't keep it in, keep it going. So it is working. They locking up Black people because it is working for some people. Where are the prisons located? In rural America, where a lot of whites live and get jobs. What are the prisoners doing? They building stuff for $1 million and $1 billion corporations. So it is working for some. We got to admit that. Like sometimes we may not have agency in our lives, but that's why we advocate for more agency. That's why we build groups and collectives and work with lawyers and do things we need to address our problems. But it's hard to see the systematic racism because it's pervasive, it's everywhere. And I don't care what subject you pick, the core of it is European in America. So you're gonna get European results.
Rodney, man, that's a good, I like how you addressed that and framed it, how, in the rural towns, man, because I done made those drives. Brandon, I know you have. And so to the same response, I asked somebody years ago who works in nonprofit, nonprofit. And I said, what we ultimately have to do is we have to work ourselves out of the jobs. That person said, well, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to see this person do well for themselves, because if they do, then I don't have a job.
I got one more when you're done, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
A solution. We need to push for a federal job guarantee. When America hit the Great Depression, the United States did not propose we increase entrepreneurship. No, they expanded government. That's what they went, even now during COVID. They didn't say, oh, people not shopping, let's increase entrepreneurism. No, they sent out money. The government has money. They can make their own money. They're a sovereign nation. So,
I really want to add on, when you finish running, I really want to
I'm done, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I think that like we're talking about solutions, right? So the reality is, you asked about systemic racism and like what my initial reactions were. And my initial reactions were that it goes so much deeper than, we focus a lot on police on social media, but it's so much deeper than that, right? It's not just the police system, it's the criminal justice system, it's the education system, it's our healthcare system. And so I think to what Rodney just said though, right? Bureaucracies have been established to maintain what is currently exists. And we know what currently exists is pervasive with racism. At the same time, and I think this actually connects to me what some people are posting on Facebook, where like, I think that the solutions we have to focus on aren't in the center, but they're over here. We have to somehow create that same infrastructure that sustains this racism, right? This racist system. We have to build that to sustain something that is anti-racist, right? We have to create that same infrastructure that maintains an anti-racist system for healthcare, for education, because it's not, in my opinion, it's not enough to just dismantle those systems, because then your best case scenario is like maybe people's mind shift to the center. I don't think that's enough. I think we have to be intentional, and some of the things, I'm sure we'll go more into it later, but it has to do with what curriculum is dictated, where we're building these things. The federal job guarantee is something that I'm really glad you brought up, Rodney, and those are all things I think that are on this other side, where we're building systems that sustain an anti-racist society. I got a little hype there, sorry.
As expected. And again, you guys are I'm taking notes, because you guys are you guys are hitting it on the head tonight. So Brandon, can you bring it on home for us? I know you got it, man. I know you got something to say.
Yeah, so for me, it is the representation of youth voices. So the young people that I work with have all been suspended, expelled, arrested, put on GPS monitoring. Like, all of these things have been put on their shoulders and their lives. And we don't have enough spaces where they are represented in decision-making, in these curriculum development concepts. But not only that, there's not a lot of people fighting for them to get back into school. The research shows that when kids are returning from being locked up, if it is a smooth process and a welcoming process to allow them back into their home school, the likelihood of recidivism is minimized drastically. However, our systems have been created to say, actually, we're not welcoming you back, you cannot come back, and we're not offering you any type of supportive alternatives. We expect you to do this by yourself, and if you don't, we're going to blame you for it and take the money that the state's giving us because you're human capital, your financial capital, and we're going to maximize that, but we're going to watch you fail, applaud you for failing, and then applaud ourselves for trying to save you.
That sounds crazy.
Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. This has been Community Conversations. If you're just tuning in, you might as well go ahead and
Eric, let me
go ahead, brother.
Say something real clear. So like the way this works is, so in August, we see, so our numbers are always very low in August. Why? Because schools get money in September for this count, right? So in September, schools receive funding for all of the bodies they have in seats. So the kids that are always cussing out teachers, always late, always whatever, from August till mid-September, we find a way to deal with this. But when the schools get that count, they kick kids out the very next day, and our numbers triple. Because they're like, well, why should I keep you in school when I got the money for you? So I need people to understand that that is how this works. We have resources from August to mid-September on how to be restorative. But once the money is received, we don't believe in restorative justice. We believe in evictions from educational process.
Mm. On top of the youth who are coming to you, bringing that trauma full fold in your face. So what you said tied into what Jack said in terms of the infrastructure. Give me the kids and we'll create a new infrastructure. And that ties into what Rodney said. If we create that new infrastructure, then we keep our kids out of your prisons. And then we hit the pockets of those rural towns who are depending on the money from those prisons. And then that kind of circles back to what Shayla said, then we'll be able to actually make some moves from a law perspective and a policy impact. So that was interesting how that just kind of went. And Brandon, how you literally tied that all together.
Hey,
I've never had a conversation like this, and I'm just Tamika, have you? No.
Hey,
Yes,
I'm a teacher. So, oh yeah, Jack, you may know it. Brandon's so right. That ADM count, man, they go bananas over this count. I mean, bananas. And what I was gonna say for a solution, we need to. So the majority of the teachers are white females, so they're not expelling their kids. Same things with prisons. When you look at homogenous communities like Switzerland and stuff, they have very low imprisonment rates because they don't want to lock up their own people. So I think we need to push for programs that are similar like Teach for America and start hiring more Blacks and Hispanics, because it's just dominated by white females. And then the white females send them from the classroom to the white male dominated police force.
Yeah, the pipeline. Downhill pipeline.
What time is it? 7:40. Fitz, how you doing, man? What you got for us, Fitz? I know you've been hearing all of this, so what's being put on that path?
Nah, man. Shoot, I'm just taking in everything everybody's saying. I will chime in something. As far as solution wise, I think the problem is racism has already failed this generation. You know, but one thing it's doing right now is making kids, because I know when I was younger, I wasn't having these kind of conversations. So I think right now it's kind of making kids talk about it. It's making everybody talk about it. Some problem is now, like, you quarantine at home and, you know, you got parents picking sides, and and these kids are seeing their parents either pick their sides, and you know what I'm saying? This is how I feel like it still exists. It's a people problem. You can't go nowhere and get taught racism. You know, this is just something embedded into people that continue to practice their habits and pass it on to other kids. So I think the only way you can really kind of, you know, solve the problem is attacking the youth and making sure, you know, that they know the difference and know the problem.
I think, man, you really circled it all the way in, because it sounds simple, and it is really as simple as it sounds, considering that we know that these behaviors are learned.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we get to be older, you know, we want to try to unlearn it when our brains develop. But it's just like, that's how instrumental this conversation is. It's detrimental to what we're talking about, because not only, I mean, the whole fabric of education is designed to create these results. And again, you have so many nonprofits put on. I mean, literally, truly, if we are living in a world, and I get tired of hearing the conversation, it's not just meant for everybody and everything like that. I said, well, if these things aren't set up in place, Fitz hit it on the head. You got kids coming in who got different trauma from parents who have dealt with different trauma, from parents who have dealt with different trauma. And again, let me be clear that the trauma is on two sides of the coin, whether you're white, black, whatever race you're hearing, because you're still soaking in race from that perspective, and that's your lens. And, you know, and so it's interesting because when somebody grows to this certain level and just says, I'm not like my parents, I'm colorblind, not knowing that that's just as toxic as, but that's putting you in a position to where you're not, no, you're not as bad as your parents. You're getting to the place where, I'm sorry to mention, it's worse. Because if the trauma is coming down DNA for me as a Black man and it's still getting worse, that trauma of being naive, that trauma of thinking that you don't know that you don't not aware of your privilege, your fragility, or whatever, this and the power in that, that also is traumatic. Because like I mentioned in the poem, I put it all in that poem. I said, because you have people that have been oppressed 500 years, that doesn't make you weak, that makes you strong. Because in the midst of all that, you still learn how to love, you still learn how to care, you still have been able to, the oppressed has pushed humanity forward in spite of hatred. Think about that. Tamika, you are in the, you are Hall of Famer of the WNBA, oppression on top of oppression, being a woman, being a Black woman. And you know how hard you had to fight. I was so proud of you when you took a knee and you made that protest on made every, you know, so I don't know.
Well, I think it's hard. So like you talk about oppression, you talk about racism, and I feel like everything that's been discussed so far, but like bringing it back to the school system and the educational system, you know, one thing that even from my standpoint, I don't have kids, but obviously through our foundation and my nephews and, you know, like, and my brothers, I mean, I'm around kids all the time. And one thing that's been really, really hard is, you know, you as parent, you want to make sure your kid have the right education, whatever that looks like, right? So I need my kid to be in this district because this is supposed to be the best district. And I don't, now we got charter schools and public schools and all different types of schools, like they just have school after school. But you see, like, and one thing that's affected our family a little bit is, you know, going to a school system where you're one of the few African-American kids walking around in a predominantly white school. And now all of a sudden you're targeted, and every single place you go, you're targeted. And, you know, some of the things that you do wrong, if you do it wrong compared to, you know, a Black kid doing it compared to a white kid, you know, I've seen my nephew like get expelled from school or get suspended from school for simple stuff. And it's not even things that are worthy of being sent home from school. You're talking about in you know, in middle school, not beating up a teacher, not, you know, cussing people out, like nothing like that. It's like simple things that have sent him home. And it's been hard to stand by and to sit by, because it's like, okay, we're supposed to be in an educational system where we're teaching the kids and we're educating and we're lifting them up and we're pushing them to be successful. And it goes back to what you said earlier, like we're not trying to see them succeed. Or I don't know if it was Eric or Rodney said, we're not trying to see the kids succeed. We're trying to see them fail. And so we send them to school, but we really want, as Black kids, we really want them to fail, depending on where they're going. And so I think I keep harping on this question of what can we do to make change? Because we have gotten to a point where now people want change, but now people don't know how to create change. Is it the teachers need more training? Is it, you know, before a teacher is actually certified, they need to work in a diverse group, a diverse crowd? Like, is it that they need to live in the neighborhood that they're going to be actually teaching? I mean, what is it that they're supposed to do? And, you know, like suspension, detention, like all of these things that are being minor things. How are we going to educate these kids, and how are we going to get teachers to be able to teach what they're supposed to be teaching? Also allowing our young kids, our young Black kids, to be able to be in a system that will help lift them up instead of tear them down.
The only thing I want to add to that is I think that, like, and I don't know how Rodney, if you'd agree or disagree, but like, also like who decides what those things the kids need to learn are, right? Like, because those standards are like kind of BS, right? Like, I mean, like those standards are designed with certain students in mind, and that trickles down. We talk about this from a system, and right, and how it affects education. We have in Indiana and many states have an A through F system, all right? Well, that means someone's going to be on top, someone's going to be on bottom. And what are the schools that are going to be on bottom? And so then the solution for that isn't to invest that money into those students or into those teachers or the training for those teachers. It's, you have to use this millions of dollars, right? We're going to put it in front of this F school, and we're going to say, oh, no, you have to spend it on one of our approved education vendors. So who's making money off this? Because like, what? So, I mean, this is designed because like you know, and when I say you, I'm saying like the system, right? Like the system needs there to be F schools so that the millions of dollars in that budget can be spent on an educational vendor who can be making millions of dollars. Like, it's just like, it's so frustrating. I do want to take just a quick moment. Like, I really appreciate in my district that there has been an emphasis on racial equity for several years now. Like, this is like, IPS has been really working and piloting racial equity schools. And I mean, my own criticism would be like, it's not fast enough, but like, they've been pioneering like really this work and trying to get as many of these trainings in for teachers. And it's going, I think, like really well, but also we're limited by resources, right? Like, there's only so many like dollars in a day. And since we can't just, we can't just like use the money that we need, right? Because you've got these like approved vendors that you have to use for different things. It can be frustrating because sometimes there's these strings attached that makes it more difficult to make some of these interventions and trainings happen that are pretty like broadly accepted by, you know, like by people to be impactful and to be making a difference.
Yeah, I was holding up this book. My wife had handed it to me, kind of spoke to what you're saying. The Careless Society, Community and Its Counterfeits by John McKnight really kind of touches upon that. Just everything's pretty much a fake $20 bill. You know, it looks good, everything like that, but on the inside, there's nothing really truly holding it there. Hey guys, man, we're getting a lot of traction on Facebook, and we're getting a lot of good responses to kind of maybe frame where we're going to in terms of solutions and literature. But I saw it and I just couldn't ignore it, and I wanted our viewers out here to kind of feel a part of this conversation too. That's okay, Tamika.
One thing though, before you get in there, and I'm gonna I lost my train of thought for a second while you were saying that, but you know, at what point, so we're talking about all these different things, and like I said, I'm not an educator. I educate in a different way. So I'm not a teacher, I should say. I educate in a different way. But at what point do history books get rewritten?
Mm-hmm.
Because even with what we're going through right now, COVID-19, this will go into a history book, right? George Floyd and everything that transpired, even hopefully they'll go back further and further. Maybe they won't go back all the way 400 years, but at what point will the history books be rewritten? Because I think that would be the most important. And Jack, to your point of what are the kids supposed to be learning? So, and who decide what kids are supposed to be learning what? I mean, I think a lot of that goes to not a lot of kids. And I said this when we got on the call earlier, Rodney's done a great job. He found clips of African-American history and had compiled all these clips, and I was watching them with my husband, and I'm like, I don't even know where he found them, but he managed to find them and produce them and put them together in a clip where you can just go and watch it. I'm like, I'm X amount years old and I have never seen a lot of the footage that he's had. And I have a problem with that at 40 years old. I have a problem with the fact that I don't even know my history. And education wise, like now, like I'm trying to, you know, I said this last week too, like I'm just trying to I'm like almost drinking water from a fire hose, trying to learn as much as I can so that when I'm out protesting and I'm out in the sit-ins and I'm out talking, I know what I'm talking about. You know, Jack asked a question before we even got on. At what point did you hear about Juneteenth? I mean, we heard about Juneteenth, but nobody's really put emphasis on Juneteenth until this year. This is the first year that it's become like, oh, we need, as a company, we need to shut down and we're going to start telling. Nobody was thinking about Juneteenth.
And that's on levels, right? That's like you said, that's on levels.
Yeah, and I want to address, when you're done, I want to address it too.
Go ahead.
As far as who decides what, it should be the community. It's unfair for another community to decide how to educate and what to educate somebody else's community. The very reason we even have public schools is because of the freed slaves pushing for it. The public school system is a product of Free slaves saying they needed education. And guess where they started educating themselves? The Black church. That's what we gotten away from. We need our black church. They don't know. I'm not blaming them, but I'm just saying this is the basis for our political education and just normal education was the Black church. So I think we got to get back to more community-based education. It can still be funded with federal dollars, but who would want somebody else determining what your kids should learn? You should be in charge of that. Like Jack said, when you have a bureaucracy, then you got to jump through a million hoops just to get one small change. So we need to get it to where it's a small community deciding what their kids are going to learn, because if we know that we're facing racism, if we know that there's a racial wealth gap, if we know we got high divorce rates, high mortality rates, then it's up to us to decide how to fix it. Our kids need to be trained in a way that they can see the problem through their eyes, from their authors, and then come up with a plan of action, evaluate it after they put it in action, and fix it, and just keep repeating that process. But allowing someone else to educate you is never going to turn out well. If we was playing basketball, if you were the Fever, you wouldn't want the Mystics training you. Right?
You're right.
The only thing I want to like maybe push back a little bit, the only thing I would push, because I agree with so much of what you just said, but the only reason I would push back at all would be like, if we focus too much on the community, then what I worry about is then like reinforcing narratives in these predominantly white communities, right? Because like if the only people learning African-American history are African-American communities, right, or Black communities, then I think it's only going to exacerbate ignorance in white communities. And if we're seeing,
and that's not what I meant either, Jay.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt you, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in addition to the federal government forcing everybody to change the history books to put more women, more Asians, Hispanics, and Blacks in the history books, communities also decide how their kids will be educated.
I think the problem,
because each community faces different problems.
Right. And I think the problem is twofold, because we can teach the right thing and the wrong person can tell it to you, and you have a problem. I remember learning geometry. My geometry teacher wanted to be a singer-songwriter, and so she played her guitar and sang everything. So I know the tune to the quadratic formula, but I sure can't put it into practice. So I don't care who gives the curriculum. I don't want a teacher that thinks that Rosa Parks should have got up and that thinks that, well, you got to drink from a water fountain. Who cares what it was labeled? I don't want you teaching Black history, because you're going to skew it, because you can't change history. So you're going to put your effort into changing the minds of the future generations about what history meant. I don't want you teaching about George Floyd if you're like, and he was resisting arrest and he should have just calmly waited when the officers wanted. No, I need you to teach it from a perspective of change and of challenge. And I feel like the issue is it becomes, sorry, I'm hyped up. I'm writing myself a huge.
I like it.
I think the problem becomes our Black students go into the schools with a chip on their shoulder. You can't learn with a chip on your shoulder. I don't care who teaches you what. So you have students with a chip on their shoulder, and then you have teachers who are apologists. Nothing's happening, because you're either not going to be able to handle them because that chip, because the chip manifests itself. You either are quiet and passive, or you're the class clown, or you're something to be seen by a system that has made you invisible. So you're seen but not heard. So you gonna do something maybe ignorant to be seen. And so I think it doesn't matter who teaches what. It doesn't matter who teaches what, because it's the heart behind what you're teaching. So I sit on the Goodwill Board of Education, and the Met, they get students just like that all the time, kicked out of school, coming out of probation, gotta find a school to go to. They have the Excel centers. It's an adult high school. So that tells me it matters more who than what. Because if your school is making you feel like a number until that money comes in, they could be teaching you all about slavery, all about the triumphs of the Black community. You know you on your way out of there, so it doesn't matter. So sorry, I got amped up, but
I like it.
So I'm really glad that you brought up that visibility piece. So when they do trainings on undoing racism, there's this term called exaggerated visibility, and that is a term to describe, you don't see me as a person, so I'm going to create a condition where you have no choice but to see me. And Tamika, you said earlier something about young students just wanting to be. it was simple just to be. And I think one way that we can recreate or rewrite history is being intentional on having students, specifically our students of color, specifically our young Black males, having spaces for them to express and process their trauma freely, without judgment, without repercussions, and without stipulations. We were at Kia and I, my boss, we had gone to tech, and we were there just to have a meeting to talk about some programming. And there were two girls in the lobby waiting to see the principal, and they were in trouble. And we had asked them, we were like, well, what do you think you need? They said, we need counselors who can counsel and not simply check a box and say that they met with me to counsel. So we have all these young people who have all this trauma, and we have to also understand trauma is systemic. Media is trauma. History and curriculum in schools is trauma. School resource officers are certainly traumatic. And so we have students who don't have a free space to just express the fact that they are pissed off and they are tired of everything. We have to have that space. We have to allow them the opportunity to heal collectively. Like Rodney said, the community has to do a better job of creating spaces without judgment. These kids get arrested and we see them on the news, and we see people who are like, well, where they mama at? Or why are they at home in bed? Or it's past curfew. I don't care. What are you doing to step up and be in their life? Stop talking about them and step up and do something about it. And we can start that in the classrooms.
Thank you, Brandon. And I appreciate everybody's comments. Like I said, man, our Facebook is going off right now, guys, because I'm willing to bet by the responses that I'm seeing that you guys are striking all kind of nerves. The conversation in which we're having tonight is one, like I said, I think we're in a different space. And so this conversation that we're having, it is very bare. And I think one of the things I conclude it might be the solution is just having some realization that, we all may have went through K through 12, but our education is not done just even on the K through 12. I'm 37. My K through 12 education is not complete. And
it might not be not complete.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't feel whole.
You didn't learn the thing that you need to learn, and
right.
It's not just about now. Like, I'm gonna go off a little bit, but it's not just the education about racism and being an anti-racist and just the history and all. It's not just about that. That's one part of it. But I'm gonna go to what Brandon said about the young man that needed to get some funds. We don't even teach about finance. Like, we don't teach about entrepreneurship to what Rodney would talk. We don't teach about any of that. And like, I know for myself, I have over and over listened to Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor. I mean, like, I am now, and not just now, but, like, really trying to dive into the education part of that. So, I mean, that goes with even the educational system.
I want to touch on that when you're done.
Most Black kids were taught, go to school, go to college, get a job. And that's what you're taught. Okay. A lot of white, not all, but majority. And majority of the white kids are taught, go to school, go to college, so that you can own your own business. And so there's two different, even from like, so even think about the track record of the thing that you're learning and the way that you're learning and the way that your parents are talking to you to get to that point of being able to be successful in the educational system and the finance, which is part of education. I mean, there's a lot of things that probably need to be rewritten as far as what are the things that are gonna help, not just there, but just drive our society, because we need the young generation. Like, all of us are gonna be gone at some point in time. We need that younger generation to learn from us and to learn from our mistakes and to really like push forward, get rid of racism. What does it take for our society to be successful? And that's what we need to be driving. That's what we need to be teaching. Somebody over here in the chat said, it should be about love. And I think you can tell all of us are passionate in the way that we talk. Like, we love what we do and we love what we're talking about. And we genuinely want to make change, but love can only get you so far.
Mhm.
You got to have an action plan too. Like, I love you and you're great and this is awesome, but there's also got to be some action with that love.
I so wish there was a human code. I mean, as it pertains to love, I know we all have our differences, this and another, but it's like we can't agree on 3 things, you know, and in terms of just surviving, can we not all sit back and process to see where hatred and humanity has touched all of these to the point where we're not getting to where we need to be. It had me thinking about, I was going to go towards Brown versus the Board of Education, just to kind of see who wanted to nibble on that in terms of, you know, that being that great middle to where everything was supposed to be great again. But it seems I've heard it both sides. That should have never happened. You know, again, it's the right people that's in the wrong place. You got integration, but you got still people with racist mindsets or limited mindsets trying to teach this kid to believe in their dreams. So, you know, I'll throw that out there if anybody wants to intertwine that into, you know, just kind of what their responses are. So, you know, again, that's the law. So, Shayla, you know, that's always a layup to you.
Say that, so in my job now, I do the training and development, work on workforce plans. And so Brown versus Board of Education, so schools should no longer be segregated. I get it, but to your point, okay, I almost would have rather stay in the Black school with people who look like me, who don't have a problem with me, versus integrate and be uncomfortable to where I can't learn. And so I think we look at what we do now. I'm teaching unconscious bias. I'm talking about privilege. I'm talking about being an effective communicator. These are things, to Tamika's point, that we have to learn well before our mid 20s. I'm 27 having these conversations with people well older than me. And they're looking at me like, what? Privilege? Social privilege? How do I, explaining how to be an ally. If you're learning that now, what have you been doing before? So Brown versus Board of Education is great, but you didn't desegregate education. You just mixed people together and taught them one thing, but nothing taught them how to commingle. Nothing taught them how to work with people who don't look like them. Nothing taught them how to get along with people that they disagree with and not have to act a fool. And so I'll go back to Rodney's point, the Black church. I'm born and raised Kojic, Church of God in Christ. And the church should be a part of the learning for a lot of people, because that should be teaching you to love your neighbor. And we can translate that into school. Love your neighbor by not XYZ. But if I'm teaching that to you now, how have you been treating people well before the day of your hour-and-a-half training with me?
I want to pop in there just for a moment. And I know Rodney's going to agree with this, I hope. But like, I'm so lucky. I work at Harshman Middle School, and like, my kids are going to change the world. Like, they're some of like the brightest, like the coolest kids. And we've created a really, I think, cool culture at our school. And we're not perfect. There's things that we're still working through and that we're trying to do better. But like, to Brandon's point, like, we're trying to find ways to more organically like work processing time into the things we're doing. Like, how are we providing spaces for our students to process through things that, like, the chips that they might have on their shoulder? Or how are we creating dialogues between teachers and students? That's something one of my colleagues, Carrie Clark, is working on. Like, how do we create dialogues that shows kids that like adults also have trauma? And like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you like model that and have like better conversations? And so like, I don't want to dismiss work that is happening, but at the same time, to Shayla's point, like, we all have to do better, and school can't be the only place where it's happening, mm-hmm. right? Like, even if I am super like lucky to work in the school with colleagues and with students who are like dedicated to this work, like, that's one building in one city, in one state, do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we move more? How do we involve our community and also like our government in a way that like prioritizes this and is putting money towards this, right? Like, and is saying like, that's where the dollars need to be, not, I don't know if you all saw that Georgia canceled for next year their standardized test and saved $10 million just from the standardized test, right? Like, is spending $10-20 million on a standardized test the best use of our money, or should we be investing this in the spaces and the communities that are going to help our students and our teachers process through these traumas to have better conversations and like form more positive relationships, like more positive learning partnerships?
So last week our conversation was, this was the title. So racism exists. How do I talk to my kids about it? And when we talked about like the kid part was just like, how do you talk to anybody about it? And Jack, to your point, I really feel like it's not just the education system that needs to have the conversation with the kids. I've had people reach out and just literally, I don't know how to talk to my kid about it, but it has to start in the home. We have to be able, but we can't talk about it at home if we're not educated on what it is. And if we haven't, emotionally, and I think Eric talked about this, the emotional pool that you have. And then when you don't know how to talk about it and you don't know how to deal with it, I'd be the first person to say, like, we grew up in a privileged environment. My father played in the NBA, so we moved around, and we were always a minority in all the schools that we went to. And so even realizing there's white privilege, but there's also Black privilege. It doesn't go, like, it's not just white people, there's Black privilege too. But I think for me, my eyes have been open, and I know I've shared this on plenty of the calls, but even going to a sit-in and going to the protest, you asked me before all that happened if I would have been out there, and I would have looked, I would have looked at you crazy, like I would have never done that. But now, educating myself and talking to my parents and talking to people that are around me and hearing about the things and the struggles that they had to go through, it's given me the fire of, I want to make change and I want to do whatever I can for my part. This conversation, this is great, and there's only so much that you can do from a Zoom call and being here, but all of us have our own different circles. So we need to educate from the home, like the parents, but if the parents aren't educated, then we have to be able to create those spaces like Brandon and Jack and Rodney and Shayla all talked about in the school system. What counselor is there not to check a box, but to really physically be there? And my stepmom's a counselor. This is something that she is in the school system. So really being able to sit down, talk to the kids. One person on the chat talked about, I'm willing to help somebody as long as they have a dream. Kids aren't dreaming anymore. Right. My dream is to get to 18 years old. Like, I'm seeing all these kids getting shot and killed. I'm just trying today. Let me just focus on today. Let me get through today. I see a cop car. Oh my gosh, like I'm freaking out. There's just there's no room to dream unless you live in certain areas of town. Sorry, I got fired up.
I think to go off of that, so I think a lot of times we place this huge accountability on students, parents, and communities. We have to place that same amount on educators, especially white folks. There are a lot of white teachers and educators who I feel like their intent is great, but it's limited to the boundaries of the school building. And until we get educators who look like me, look like Jack, to think beyond the walls of the structure of the building, then we're preaching to the choir. Because until white educators realize what privilege looks like, but also take some time and invest their energy into the space of that community, then a lot of these conversations aren't going to happen. There's a book called For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood and the Rest of Y'all Too, by Dr. Christopher Emdin. He talks about this concept called cosmopolitanism. Yeah, that book right there. And that definition is when we expect for students to emotionally invest in a physical space to take responsibility over that. We have to expect for educators to do the same thing. How many times do we hear teachers say that, well, I don't know any teacher who says they do it for the check because teachers ain't getting paid enough. But like, we have, like, a lot of teachers don't even live in the neighborhoods they teach in, or even if they don't, they're not familiar with the cultural context. I was a parent liaison for School 57 with IPS, and it bothered me that we have so many teachers who couldn't discern between the 3 different socioeconomic groups of the Irvington area. How have you taught here 20 years and you don't know there's 3 different kinds of Irvingtons? Like, we have to have educators who understand the cultural context of these schools and the school board. Why are you sending East Side and West Side kids to the same school and you think problems ain't gonna happen? You lost your mind.
I agree with a lot of what y'all saying, and just to add to it, I would have to bring back basketball. When a coach trains a player, he's surprised when the player acts or plays differently than the training. And that's what we're all saying right now. We're all being trained to see the world through white racist eyes, and then surprised when people are being racist. So we need to change the institutions. Institutions are set up to normalize and standardize information. You don't want Muslim people teaching Christians. That's why you have Christian churches and Christian societies, so you can replicate Christian ideas. So if we don't change the institutions, why are we surprised at what we get? We gotta, the parents are educated at the institutions, the schools, the media is white, European owned and driven. So that's what we're gonna get. If we don't change the institutions, you're not gonna change the behaviors of large amounts of people. You're gonna get a few, but you want control of institutions because they do a better job at disseminating information and standardizing it. That's why we have law schools and medical schools. You don't want one-to-one all the time because you want to educate a large amount of people. So we got to attack these institutions.
So with that being said, there was a question, because I know we're getting close to our time here, but what do you guys think are some tangible action items to assist making a more inclusive learning space for all?
I think a lot of our problems are political and economic based. So if we give people jobs, if we had a federal job guarantee, we're going to see a lot of stress, a lot of trauma being able to be taken care of, because now we'll be able to have money for therapy and counseling. Parents will be able to take off work and relax, take a vacation. Kids will be exposed to more things. Parents will be able to read to their kids. So we also need more funding so that we can get more aides in the building. I think more aides in the building, especially more Black aides, more Hispanic aides, and give these teachers some help, because these classrooms are overcrowded. But I think if we start at not looking at the school first and taking care of the problems parents are facing, I think a lot of problems we see in school will die down and we'll be able to take care of them more.
I also think,
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
I want to jump in real quick. So, Eric, great question. Rodney, great answer. Let's break this down a little bit though. So what are some tangible things that we can do right now? Obviously, we're coming out of COVID-19. There's been a lot of money that's been lost on everywhere. So as we go into next year and let's look at like short term first. So as we go into this school year coming up, what are some tangible changes that we can all do to make change now?
The first thing I would point to for teachers, if there are teachers watching this, relationships are the single most important thing that you can do as a teacher, period, relationships. And if you're looking for something concrete to do, Zaretta Hammond has written a lot about this and learning partnerships, and how the combination of rapport and trust leads to authentic learning. So if you're a teacher watching this, I highly encourage you to, whether it's Zaretta Hammond or another author, look into how are you building relationships in your classrooms with your students that are mindful of where you're coming from and your biases, as well as your students. I know that might seem intangible, but for teachers, that is a tangible thing. Relationships are something that we think about, or should be thinking about, and we need to be intentional with how we're building those relationships with our students, especially in a COVID learning environment where you might only see the kids for briefly or a few times before the script is flipped. And if you don't have a relationship, then that's only going to exacerbate any of the inequities that are going to be able to prevent them from doing work at home.
So I don't know what onboarding looks like there, but I think that every teacher needs to go through some kind of unconscious bias training at onboarding, because that is the start of you addressing and changing your ideologies. And we talk so much about the cultural lens, the way you see the world, the way you show up in the world. if we can start to shift the cultural lens, think about students who study abroad. They come back real woke because you got to live in X and then you had to adapt to the culture because you were the minority. Try not fitting in. You might not survive out there. So if we can do unconscious bias training and we can open up people's minds, then you'll catch yourself when you hear a white person's dream to be X and you validate it. And then you hear a Black man's dream to be a rapper or a spoken word artist, and you're like, that's a hobby, pick something else. You'll learn to validate people's existence if you recognize when you have a bias at play, then you can address it, then you can overcome it. But if we don't introduce that information to people and the tools to break them down, they're going to sit there with an unconscious bias that becomes conscious in the way that you teach and react to the students.
I don't know if you've shared this resource, but like if Tease Me could maybe like publish or put out like the, the Harvard implicit bias surveys and stuff, I think that could be something interesting for anyone watching to like check those out because we all do have biases. Everyone on this call right now, like we all have biases that we bring into it. And the important part is to know those biases, right? Because if we don't know them, then we don't know how they're affecting that. So I'll go ahead and shoot that to you so that we can publish that out there.
I think what you're saying, man, really kind of gives strength to the the whole inclusion of emotional intelligence and how that can be weighed, I guess, quantitatively or into the whole conversation. Just look, this can be broke down to numbers too. If this is not just all opinionated, there's no way to escape that. And again, how do we those unconscious bias training? Again, what switches? What is at that actual standard? Because we're talking about creating new standards in a sense. That have that rigor room and understanding that growth that is not so layered in there that it becomes this all over again. But I think everybody really kind of touched upon that question.
I didn't.
Oh, go ahead, Rodney.
Tangible things. Read with your students. Read something that's outside the curriculum and meditate.
And I would say there should be student representation on school boards and leadership teams in the buildings. So if you have a student on the actual school the school board, then you have a perspective from what it is directly impacting. Because if you got adults making decisions for kids, that makes no sense. So there should be a student representative on the school board and in every single school on their leadership team, because they all have them, there should be a student representative. And looking at disciplinary policies, IPS still has a policy that students who curse at a teacher is considered a level 2 violation that can result in immediate suspension and possible expulsion. Who do you think is going to get that compared to other students? So we have to look at these policies, but students have to have a voice in decision making. I'm not talking about an advisory council. I'm talking about the actual school board. Quit placating these students and treating them like Matilda.
And bring in parents to the interview process. You should have parents from your neighborhood interviewing potential teachers as well. That gets them invested in their child's education. That makes sure that you have a voice from the community, making sure that this person who's going to oversee and be an authority figure, because students who can't respect teachers are most likely not going to respect police officers. So you're acting in it as an authority figure. So I think that there needs to be parents on that board too. And on the review board, the hiring board, the disciplinary committee. Because if you don't have that outside perspective, you'll be so tunnel visioned and miss out on things that could have gone wrong in that person's life, things going on in the community that could cause that student to cuss or slip or fight. And I think if you have that outside perspective, you kind of keep your ear to the ground without having to necessarily go out and hear it, you bring it inside.
Well, Tamika, here we go. Wow. Man, I feel like I was in college just right about now, man. All this knowledge, man, that comes in the last 3 hours, and you guys are phenomenal.
Yeah, you are.
And I don't think we can thank you enough for joining us tonight. We can't thank you enough for the work that you have done, because it sounds like you guys have already been in the narrative that mirrors the solution. And so now is the time for you to not feel like you need to code switch, that you need to silence yourself, and for fear that it won't be everybody on here. I feel like with what you have to say and what you're doing, you now have the upper hand, and you now have the responsibility. You now have the potential to carry the torch of actual integrity. And that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. This is awesome. And, first off, I appreciate you guys coming on and being a part of the conversation. It's interesting because on this call, obviously I know Eric and Rodney. Fitz has done artwork at Tease Me Cafe. Brandon, I'm sure we've crossed paths before, but this is my first time meeting, like kind of in person, Jack and Shayla, and to be able to have a conversation that's so in depth and the passion and the love and just like all of the experiences that we've all had in our own world, how they just kind of mesh together. What I hope coming out of this conversation is, that we continue to work together in the spaces that we're all individually in. Collectively, we can work together to figure that out. So, one of the things when we get done with doing this month, since we're doing every single Friday this month, next week, we're doing every single Friday this month. Yeah. So next week we'll touch on the faith aspect. But what I hope is when we get finished and once we get out of COVID-19 and we can all kind of pool together, we should figure out and just kind of have another conversation with all of us about what the action plans will be, because everybody's working on individual action plans with their different organizations. How do we pull that together, and how do we use the resources that each one of us have to put it on a platform? Because I think that's the biggest thing. I realize my platform and my voice allows me certain places and certain seats at certain tables that some people might not be able to get on, as is everybody in this circle has different platforms where some of us may or may not be able to get to. I think from here, it's really important for us to figure out what our action plan is and what our spaces need to be and how we can make change, because we have got to stay not angry, that's a bad word. We've got to stay energized for change. And we've got to stay realizing that we cannot do it individually with our own spaces. We're gonna have to attack this as a collective unit. So I'm excited about that. But I'm even more excited because we have not gone to Fitz in a long time. So I want to see Fitz. Let's see what you got, man. I know you're not finished yet. Or maybe you are, I don't know. So we'll bring Fitz on. Hey, Eric, I got a request for you.
Here we go.
Hold on 1 second, Fitz. Ooh.
Oh.
No. So Eric, I got a request. Can you reread your poem to lead us out? No, come on, Eric. You won't read it again? Are you shy?
Can you at least give us the line about overkilling, please? Like that's it.
One and done. One and done. Oh,
One and done, man.
One and done.
Well, I
right.
apologize. What I'm about to do is I'm about to catch a bike ride for Juneteenth downtown at 8:45. So as soon as I click off here, I'm gonna go to this bike ride.
Okay.
It's not that I don't want to.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Fitz, what you got? Unmute yourself. There you go.
There you go. Yeah, I was trying to put the writing in, but one bubble says, "Why don't we learn about Juneteenth?" I've been trying to pick up, little things that we've been talking about. Why aren't there more Black scholars? And what I mean by that, I just mean not just teachers, but lawyers, doctors, people in more positions to make change, federal governors, as such as we said. And then another topic that we touched on was how we, I don't want to say I can't afford to go to college, but how difficult it is for us to go to college, because some of us are taught either use your talents or, you do a sport, do something, and then use financial aid, and then you know what, you'll be in school. So yeah, those are the 3 bubbles I figured out.
Awesome. Well,
Wow.
we can't wait. We'll post it next week when you get finished with it. We'll also have it in the tea shop. So when we open up the tea shop, we'll have it out in the tea shop for a while. And yeah. All right. What you got for us? Shut it out. Close it out for us. Shut down. Thank you guys. I'm gonna say mine. Thank you guys so much, everybody that's on Facebook. Thank you guys. All of these will be posted on YouTube here in a couple weeks or so. So stay tuned. And I'm gonna hand it over to and join us next week for Faith. That'll be the last one of the month. All right, Eric, it's on you because you got to get to the bike ride. So
Yeah,
what
let
you
me
got?
see. Okay.
I was just gonna have you like you don't have to do a
Yeah,
poem. You could just shut it down. Whatever
Yeah.
whatever you're feeling in your heart right now.
Oh, well, what's feeling on my heart, it's always torn apart, feeling like I can wish that we can go back to the start, back to the beginning when everybody was dreaming, everybody wasn't in chains, everybody was wishing that they was in a beautiful place. Now, only thing we do is mirror around in this beautiful hate that we put on our beautiful face and try to judge others. We go head forth and we'll kill our own sisters and brothers if it means that it don't get too close to my heart. Wait a minute, what heart? There's nothing there. It's smaller than the Grinch. But constantly we walk around in this earth just ignoring the stench. We go ahead and make sure that it gets written, and I make sure it comes out of my mind so it can get communicated to fits. Wouldn't that be some stuff if we can communicate with our mind, communicate from our heart, and realize that's how it was supposed to be from the start, that we can love each other, that we can love each other hard, that we can love each other, and we can love with no disregard. We can love whether you are knowledgeable or whether you are smart or whether you know nothing at all, because blood goes through your veins. Is that so hard for us to understand? Is that so hard for us to maintain? Why is that so much of a strain to love when it is our God-given ability?
Hallelujah.
I'm out.
Drop mic. Thank you guys. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks, everybody.